Now, domestic abuse survivors have helped develop a new initiative designed to strengthen the process of obtaining a gun licence in parts of England and Wales.
Yeah, for the first time, the partners of people who are applying to own a gun will be asked questions in order to build a more detailed picture of the person who is applying. And it's already resulted in several licences being refused or revoked. Our reporter, Catherine Stancheshin, has more.
Trish, can you just show me the cabinet for me, please?
Yeah, sure.
When a person applies to own a gun, police carry out checks, including where it will be stored and what it will be used for.
Just check that open. So obviously we can see the bolts in here. We're just going to measure it off.
Trish is reapplying.
On for this over the 12 bolts.
It's good for hand-eye coordination, you know, and also for fitness, because you've got, you know, it's quite a heavy thing, and I was just really interested in it.
We're running
In Gwent, police have come up with another safeguard, though, for those who want to become licensed gun holders. A questionnaire for the people closest to the applicant, their partner.
It's a domestic abuse assessment. So obviously it's going to be based at talking to yourself and your partner.
Trish is a gun applicant herself, but so is her boyfriend, so she's answering these extra questions too.
Are you aware if your partner is on prescription medication or non-prescription medication?
Not that I'm aware of.
Has your partner ever threatened to use or has used a weapon on you?
No. It's a very good idea, and I think all police forces should do it. You know, the checks need to be done to make shootings safe.
Rhianon knows too well what can happen when a licence ends up in the wrong hands.
The relationship lasted over 5 years. It became increasingly abusive, and when I finally managed to end the relationship, that's when the stalking really ramped up. And 4 months after that, I was held at gunpoint by the perpetrator overnight, and it was the most horrific 8 hours. But that was a culmination of years of abuse and his very controlling behaviour.
Do you think there's any other questions we need to look at or adapt or change?
Some of this will be...
She has helped Gwent Police develop these additional questions, known as Project Titanium.
And there's a lot that still needs to change. I think working on Titanium will actually help show other parts. If Titanium was in existence at the time, and I'd been asked the questions, even though I didn't know I was in an abusive relationship, the way that the questions have been formulated, it may have started the thought process with me thinking, well, hang on a second, I'm experiencing this. But it would absolutely have rung alarm bells for any officer that I was speaking to.
It's currently being trialled in a number of forces, including the Metropolitan Police. It's been used on 5,000 applicants so far.
We've had 7 cases during this trial with the 3 forces where we've either revoked or refused a licence. That is 7 cases that potentially could have gone on to domestic abuse homicide. We've had 1 case where the partner was contacted. She stated that she couldn't speak to the firearm inquiry officer at her home because she was being controlled and coerced so much. That licence was then refused, and also as well we was able to put safeguarding in place for that person.
For campaigners like Rhianon, when the stakes are this high, those questions are crucial.
And if you can just prevent one, because it's never just that one life. If you can imagine a stone being thrown into water, it's the ripples from that. So to be able to prevent anyone else suffering anything like that, it's pretty momentous.
Catherine Stancheshin, BBC News.
We are joined now by Rhianon Bragg, who we saw in that report there, alongside Sarah Kirkpatrick from Welsh Women's Aid. Morning both. Rhianon, I know you've told your story on this programme before, but just for people at home, just remind us what happened to you. I know it's really unpleasant for you to talk about, so thank you for doing that, but just tell us what happened and how you've ended up in this place in your life.
So essentially I was the unwitting target of a coercive controller after 5 years of what was an abusive relationship, and I wasn't aware it was an abusive relationship. The abuse got worse and worse throughout the 5 years. I finally managed to end the relationship, and that's when the stalking really ramped up. And post-relationship, I was stalked for 4 months. It was getting increasingly worse, and the final incident was that I was held at gunpoint overnight, and threats to kill, and it was good fortune that the intervention of a GP meant that the police were then involved and the perpetrator was sentenced for what he'd done.
So the GP had to intervene?
Absolutely. So I was finally released because in the perpetrator's mind, despite the fact that it had been 5 years of abuse, despite the fact that he'd stalked me for 4 months, he'd never accepted I wanted to end the relationship. And even though he'd threatened to kill me during this 8 hours, the gun he held at my chest was one that I recognised. It's one that I'd used for clays, so I knew it was a semi-automatic shotgun that took 3 cartridges with a very fine trigger. I knew what it was capable of, and in that moment knew what he was capable of. But in his mind, despite all of that, we were going to be together. He, and in a relatively recent parole assessment, doesn't still accept full culpability, so didn't think he'd done anything wrong. And because he thought we were still going to be together, he allowed me to go to a doctor's appointment that I had anyway. And it's when I went in to see the doctor then, and I can remember my line to her was, "I think I'm going to take slightly longer than your 10 minutes." And she immediately went as a duty of care, intervened, called the police, and that was that.
In terms of the issuing of gun licences, do you think if this new scheme had existed, this questionnaire for people who are applying and consulting the partners and relatives of people who are applying for a gun licence, if that had been in existence when you were facing this situation, do you think you might have avoided what you had to go through?
Absolutely. I think there's an incredibly strong likelihood that would have been the case. And interestingly, from the coroner's report into Keam, that was one of the recommendations that
the Plymouth
shooting. That's right. Yeah, that following the inquest there, that family members, householders should be involved in this process, in the gun licensing process, because they know the licence holders best. If it had been in place in my situation, even though I didn't know I was in an abusive situation myself, which I can see the audience perhaps finding hard to believe, but it creeps up on you. These people don't turn up and say, "I'm going to be violent, I'm going to be awful, I'm going to attempt to kill you and make the lives hell for you and your children." It creeps up on you. Actually, the questions that we've developed that are asked, I think would have, as I said in your video clip, they would have set me thinking, actually, I'm experiencing some of this sounds familiar, and to any firearms officer asking those questions, the answers I'd have given, even if it's been in naivety, should have triggered massive alarm bells and caused action to be taken.
Sarah, you said you would broadly welcome the idea of this, but it's actually not straightforward for everyone, is it?
I think it's not the solution to everything. I think this could be a brilliant component to a system. But as Rhianon just said, the idea that some comments within the questionnaire might be the first moment, the first inkling for a survivor that they were experiencing abuse, that they were in a situation of danger. I'm doubtful that anyone doesn't know they are feeling bad. But giving it a name and then knowing what to do with that is vitally important. So I see this questionnaire as a tremendous opportunity, but what we have to do is have a wraparound service. Make sure that when someone is asked questions that make them think, that they're actually able to get some help, get some support, but also that that assessment of a firearms licence is done within the broader scheme of, if we're turning down the licence, what else are we doing to think about, is this person harmful? Is this person dangerous? Is this person risky? How are we going to manage that situation?
So if it's a no, what are the consequences?
Exactly that. And do not leave the victim, the person who gave the information that caused the licence to be withheld, don't leave them in a situation of danger. That's vitally important.
Rhianon, you were talking about being in a coercive relationship. I suppose we have to remember as well that if somebody's in that position, they won't necessarily have the confidence
massively
to give the information that the authorities then consult them about in a questionnaire.
Yeah. So one of the ways that these questions have been developed, it's very much taken the firearms licensing process from being a checklist set of questions to a much more of an inquiry, much more of an investigation. And I sort of almost think there's much gentler questions in the way that they ask. So it enables officers to... I know from some of the feedback that we've had from officers, it's educated them about different forms of domestic abuse, it's made them more aware of domestic abuse, that they've had incredibly positive feedback from the family members. It's really helped the style of questioning can help draw out information. So it may be that it triggers a thought within the officer that they can then follow down that line.
Thank you both so much for coming in and talking about this. I think it's 5 police forces at the moment who are trialling it. Is that right? So
that's right, yeah.
We'll keep across it and we'll talk again, I'm sure. Thank you
Brilliant.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.